Today on Lawyers with Game, we're talking to Nicole DuCane Spencer of Wisdom Gaming about her experiences in advertising, marketing, and activation in esports. Stay tuned.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lawyers with Game. If you're interested in learning more about the worlds of esports and video games and some legal issues, you're in the right place. My name is Darius Gambino, and I am first and foremost a lifelong gamer. I've played on just about every system from the Atari to the Super Nintendo to now the PlayStation 5. I am also an intellectual property attorney with over 20 years of experience advising clients on issues related to patents, trademarks, and copyrights. With me today is my colleague Leah Leyendecker. Leah and I are both members of the video gaming and esports group at our law firm Saul Ewing, which you can find on the web at www.saul.com. Leah, maybe you can say a few words about your practice and your background.
Yeah, thanks, Darius. Like Darius, I'm an attorney at Saul Ewing, Arnstein, and Lehr. I'm out of our Minneapolis office, and I advise clients on a range of corporate and IP issues, so things like general corporate affairs, contract negotiation, trademarks, and copyrights. In terms of gaming, I started out playing Sega Genesis with my younger sister in our basement after school every day. Took a fairly long hiatus from gaming, and then more recently have gotten back into it. And I've been playing a lot of Rocket League on Nintendo Switch. And we are also extremely excited to have Nicole DuCane Spencer with us today. Nicole is VP of Sales at Wisdom Gaming, which is an emerging leader in esports production and is headquartered here in Minneapolis. Wisdom specializes in content creation, tournament organization, design, and strategic brand activation within the esports industries. In Nicole's role, she leads all business development, partnerships, esports marketing strategy, and sales for Wisdom's content brands and media network, its white label production studio, and its professional esports team, Alpine Esports. Nicole is a lifelong gamer and co-founded Heroes of Fitness with her husband to help gamers, streamers, and professional esport players get fit and stay healthy, while also broadcasting weekly gaming shows on Twitch. In 2016, Nicole and her husband became Twitch partnered broadcasters, and in 2020, Twitch ambassadors. Nicole is also an influencer for brands including Blizzard Entertainment and bodybuilding.com. Nicole, we are so thrilled to have you on today's episode of Lawyers with Game. Is there anything I missed?
No, I think you introduced me better than I could introduce myself. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm always excited to talk about esports and gaming, and particularly marketing and how brands can get into the space.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Nicole. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe to them. We hope to do a season 2 of this series in the near future. If you want to do a little gaming, if you're up for a little gaming, I am Eagles Fan 71 on the PlayStation Network, and Leah is Lilo 904 on the Nintendo Switch, and we are always up for a little gaming when we're not working. Finally, please note that this series is intended to be a high-level discussion of legal issues in the worlds of esports and video games. It is not intended as actual legal advice. If you need actual legal advice, please reach out to myself or Leah. Our emails will be in the description. So Nicole, I wanted to jump in with a pretty easy question for you to start. We're all gamers here. What first got you interested in gaming, and what are some of your favorite games of all time?
Ooh, I mean, that's not an easy question, to be fair, because there's a lot of great games out there. I first got into gaming. I have a brother, and so he and I got a Nintendo 64 and started playing games. He was very young at the time, so he couldn't, my parents got it for him because he was, the boy. And he couldn't read cutscenes fast enough because he was still pretty young. So I would sit with him and I would read him the text. This is before there were audio lines and dialogue in games. So I would sit there while he played, and then I started, playing myself. We'd play lots of different games together on Nintendo, and then later Xbox, PS5, and then PC gaming. We each had Game Boys. And actually one of my early memories, even before that, was my mother was a professional makeup artist locally in Minneapolis and worked on Mystery Science Theater 3000. And I have a very vivid memory of the crew and the writers sitting in the break room with all of these PCs set up playing. It was probably Doom or Quake, like way back in like the early 90s, maybe even late 80s. And I just remember seeing them all playing and having fun. And that piqued my interest then. And then, my parents essentially let my brother and I go down that rabbit hole of playing games. A little bit of a long backstory. But my favorite games currently, there's a couple of them. I have, where do I start? I would say Zelda, Ocarina of Time. That's kind of the nostalgic one of my first favorite games. And then The Witcher 3, I think, is one of the most amazing games, very narrative-driven, beautiful game. And then Heroes of the Storm, since that's kind of really what got my husband and I into esports, into streaming. It's a great competitive game. And I think I could go on forever, so I will stop.
Yeah, well, you touched a chord with me there with The Witcher 3. Behind me somewhere on one of these shelves is a Geralt figure. And
it's so good.
And I got, after the WitcherCon that just happened recently, I decided I wanted to go back in and I wanted to finish it all. So I loaded it back up on my PS5 and I'm slowly making my way through it.
Did you play Blood and Wine, the DLC?
I haven't gotten to that one yet because I think that's level 30, or I'm just about there now.
It's really, it's amazing. They did a phenomenal job.
It's a fantastic game, and that's a great one. So, Leah, I know you had some questions for Nicole as well.
Yeah. So Nicole, I've had the pleasure of chatting with you and other members of Wisdom Gaming leadership in the past. To hear a little bit about the genesis of the company and all the really cool and innovative capabilities that Wisdom Gaming has. Can you talk a little bit about the media network, the esports marketing and sponsorship capabilities, the event production capabilities, and really anything else you'd like to highlight?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing with Wisdom is that we do a lot. So I will try to be as concise as possible. The company was founded in, I think it was 2019, and we got our start at, advising other companies, other brands getting into the space, kind of esports marketing strategy. We helped Jack Links enter the space with their deal with Team Envy. And then when COVID hit, we were also doing a lot of live events and live esports activations with like the Minnesota Twins, for example. COVID hit. We also had a burgeoning media network with different owned IP brands that we created, essentially communities that we created on Twitch or on YouTube that we built up. And due to live events shutting down, we really pivoted hard into our online capabilities and building out those brands and building out live broadcasted tournaments for games. And then we ended up picking up Riot Games became our biggest partner, particularly over the last year. And so we started producing and running tournaments for Riot for their games like Teamfight Tactics, Legends of Runeterra, and then now recently, within the last month, we are now doing Wild Rift in partnership with Nerd Street Gamers. So we've really evolved from producing our own content to actually pivoting to doing white label work for one of the biggest game publishers in the world, which has been really exciting. We handle pretty much everything for them, particularly for Teamfight Tactics. It's like all of the graphics, all of the running the tournaments, all of the broadcast capabilities, and also some publishing retainers that we do with them. So we've really evolved, particularly over the last year. But I think what we're most excited about is the future and what we have coming in the next couple months, and particularly in 2022, and getting back to live events with what will be happening. The other thing I didn't touch on is we also have our competitive esports team. It is currently named Alpine Esports, is going to be rebranded. We'll have a new name and a new look and feel. And we've picked up a couple different teams. It started with just the Rocket League competitive team that was top 8 in North America. And then we've picked up an Apex Legends team that has been just exploding. They've been doing so well. One of our influencers there is getting incredible viewership and actually hitting a big Japanese audience along with North American. And then we also just announced our our women's Carball championship team, so a Rocket League team that's a women's team that we're really excited about. So our esports team is really growing and seeing some great success, which is a ton of fun. And then the last thing that we do and we run is the Minnesota High School Varsity League. So we work with all the Minnesota high schools and supporting those leagues in Minnesota to help feed up into colleges and scholarships and building, the path to pro for young gamers and building that support in the schools. That was a long-winded answer, but we do a lot. Essentially, it's the media production and then really working with the brands, finding the best way for them to enter the space. And a lot of times that's through our various properties and content network that we have.
Yeah, you mentioned Minneapolis, and I want to talk about that. And I want to at some point go back to Teamfight Tactics because I want to see if you can tell me how I can place in the top 3 or 4 in a TFT match because I haven't been able to do it yet. But
I don't know if I'm the one to talk to, but yeah.
But so, you're based in Minneapolis. Wisdom is based in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things in attractions in Minneapolis is the Mall of America. And I know you've got something really special going on with the Mall of America. Maybe talk about that a little bit and what you have set up for the future happening there.
Yes, we are incredibly excited and very proud to announce our partnership with the Mall of America and building out our studio and our venue there. We need a studio anyway just to keep up with the demands from our clients to meet that production level. Right now we're producing all of our broadcasts from our homes, which just isn't sustainable. But of course, it's very COVID safe given the landscape right now. But coming out of it, we need to be able to fulfill the demands of our biggest clients like Riot Games. And we were looking where can we build our studio? We could have done it in a warehouse somewhere in the Twin Cities, but there was an opportunity at the Mall of America that was incredibly exciting and very unique to the landscape of what's out there in the U.S. in particular. There's a lot of different esports stadiums, esports arenas, headquarters for different teams. But with the mall, there's already the infrastructure there. It's already a tourist destination. There are already, 40 million people going through the mall every year. And so there's an opportunity for us to really leverage the mall itself as an attraction that already has traffic, essentially, and being able to bring new people there, being able to bring the younger generation, the gamer demographic, the Gen Zs, the millennials, and really make it an entertainment destination. So there was essentially this perfect fit between what we were looking to do, what they were looking to do, and kind of finding our perfect home. So we'll be building out a studio there that will have an in-studio audience. We'll have a VIP bar lounge area. There'll be a retail component. And then the really exciting opportunity is that we can activate all throughout the mall. So in the rotundas or in any open spaces, it allows us to scale events as small as, 100 people, but all the way up to 10,000 people, which is an incredible value to the brands that we work with and to the game publishers that we work with the events that we can host there and the additional reach that they get, right? As an advertising opportunity, it opens it up to something that's not really been done before. And I think that's what's been really exciting about the conversations that we've been having now that this is kind of out there and finally announced and we can kind of get going.
Yeah, you're advertising to the people that are walking by, right? And especially if, you have kids walking with parents and the kids are saying, let me check this out. This is a game I'm really interested in. And it's sponsored by Mercedes-Benz. But it sounds like a really interesting opportunity.
Exactly. I mean, it's something where you can get the parents and the kids, right? And granted, a lot of parents now, again, I'm 34, and I have a little girl. So a lot of gamers are in their 30s and 40s, like the original demographic or original gamers, the OG gamers, but they're all having kids now. And so the mall is a perfect place where there's still stuff for families to go shopping, to go to a restaurant, but then the kids can go, try out our LAN center, or they can go to the other attractions that they have there. It's family friendly. It's more than just only going there for one purpose, right? It's kind of a multi-purpose destination. And it's just, again, it's been the most exciting opportunity is how brands who are looking to get into esports, not only can they hit the esports demographic that we offer and through our media network and through the content that we create, but they can also leverage the audience and the essentially the demographic that is already coming to the mall. They can do both, which is, I think, really, really exciting.
So Nicole, you mentioned, the tremendous growth that Wisdom Gaming has had over the last couple of years, in terms of really building a portfolio of esports assets, including its professional esports organization, Alpine Esports, which has since expanded. Tell us about Alpine Esports, and the teams, and maybe some of the collaborations you've worked on with game publishers and others.
Yeah, I think it's been exciting to watch Alpine grow. It really started as a grassroots, just a Rocket League team that the community kind of loved, and then it was acquired by Wisdom last year in 2020. And since then, we've been able to grow that following and, winning, the kind of the community fan favorite awards, which has been really great. I think that's what's Wisdom does so well, and not just with our esports org, but with everything, all the communities that we build, is that we really work to build fan affinity and fan loyalty, which really ultimately drives that authentic engagement that brands are looking for. And that's what I think we do really well when it comes to how we build communities and how we've built the community around our esports teams. I think where the team was really smart in expanding was, we started with Rocket League, which is, such a phenomenal game. And that's such a great game too for non-endemic brands looking to get into the space, because it's familiar, the soccer cars, they can understand it pretty quickly, versus maybe a MOBA like League of Legends that's, or even TFT. It has kind of a higher learning curve for somebody who's never seen gaming or esports before. So, Rocket League has been phenomenal, has a phenomenal community behind it. And then Apex Legends has been really interesting because it's really picked back up and gaining a lot of player base and attention and viewership. It's a great game that is, also still, a shooter, but different from Call of Duty. And it's also not we're not having to pay the franchise fees that maybe you have to for Call of Duty or for Overwatch. So, it was a smart move to get into Apex, essentially right when it's trending up. So I really commend our team for really researching and vetting where are the places where we can expand and really see an opening to grow with a game and a competitive community that is being supported by the game publisher. So Apex has been great. I think, again, we love Rocket League, and, Wisdom has a lot of female leadership as part of the company. And so we care very much about supporting women in gaming. There's myself, and then our VP of media, JC Gluck, was one of the early female commentators for Heroes of the Storm. And so we really care about supporting women in esports and women in gaming. And so part of that is supporting the competitive scene. So bringing on the women's Rocket League team was really important to us, and we're really excited to support that going forward.
Yeah. So mentioning TFT, Teamfight Tactics, and Riot, you brought up briefly before the collaboration, the agreement that you reached with them to be essentially the major North American event organizer for Teamfight Tactics. Can you talk a little bit about how that deal happened and what you've been doing so far and what's in the future for Teamfight Tactics?
Absolutely. Teamfight Tactics is really an interesting, almost an interesting case study in esports in particular. And for us, it really solidified how we do our business. We built a community called Giant Slayer, which was really focused on Riot Games overall, but in particular, it started with Teamfight Tactics. And so we pride ourselves in listening to the community and what the fans want and what's needed. What does this community need to support it and to grow? Where sometimes the game developers, they don't have enough bandwidth to support the community with other events or other content that's needed. And so we saw that opening. We started putting on weekly events and then putting on some bigger tournaments to support the influencers and, maybe the pros in the scene. And we kind of started to grow that way and become beloved by the community, to the point where the community's recommending us and kind of asking Riot to work with us and work with our brand. And then on top of that, our team does a really phenomenal job with production and with our graphics and how we run our tournaments and coming up with great ideas. And so I think it was a natural fit for Riot to partner with us to both leverage the brand that we'd already created, because that's part of the partnership too, is some of the esports broadcasts are broadcasted on our channel. Some of it's on the official Riot channel. There's kind of a cross between the two. It's pretty unique. I mean, really out there compared to what other competitive ecosystems are run by different publishers. But I think they've garnered a lot of love from the community with how they've approached it and how they've used us. And we work very closely with their team to make it a success. But I think that's been really the key to that relationship, is being a trusted partner for Riot, is us understanding and listening to the community for them, and then giving them our recommendations on what we think will be successful, and then executing it for them, and essentially being able to handle that all for them. I think that's where we've been successful, having great relationships with the players, having great relationships with the talent, knowing what they want. I think listening to them, listening to the players, listening to the pros, listening to the fans makes a huge difference in essentially earning that loyalty and that support from them. And then that's just continued to pay off. And then what's been phenomenal about the evolution of TFT is Riot partnered up with WallStreet Trading, which is essentially live trading, almost stocks. It's fantasy, and they've integrated it with TFT, which was genius because it's a total second screen experience. And they've been really deliberate about listening to the TFT audience and finding ways for them to very authentically integrate with the community in a way that is totally, I guess, totally authentic and isn't forced. They sat back, They listened to how could they best activate in a way that is supporting. How can they support what the community already wants, which I think is the right way to do it. And so they've seen tremendous success. We just did our Giant Slayer series in the month of August. That was a phenomenal activation, with WallStreet participated in that. And it's really cool when you are working with a brand that cares as much about the community as you do, or maybe as Riot does, because they want to do it right. And ultimately, that's what we've seen has paid off for brands that are coming into the space.
Yeah, the WallStreet thing is interesting. I wanted to ask a little bit more about that. I downloaded the app and I get notifications from them. Hey, you can bet on this. Hey, you can bet on that. But basically, it's, if you have 8 players, I think it is in a TFT match, right? Mm-hmm. You can place a bet on who you think is going to come out on top, or maybe even who's going to come out in the top 3. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like a live betting system, right, for these matches. So you can be watching people on Twitch, pros play a Teamfight Tactics match, and then bet on through WallStreet who you think is going to essentially win the match, right? Yeah,
although I will say they stay away from the term betting.
Right.
There's no money. Riot's still very particular. I mean, most game companies are. There's that line that they're trying to walk with what's betting, what's fantasy, what's not. But yeah, I think that's where it's that live trading and putting up different markets, as they're calling them, is the markets of, who's going to be 8th. Will it be Becca or will it be Soju versus first, and finding ways to be what are the stories they care about? What are the stories that are happening in the broadcast narrative, in the competitive scene that's playing out, right? What can they leverage as far as what the fans and the viewers who are watching? Because what we actually saw really interestingly was there's just a direct correlation to the app open time of people engaging and trading on WallStreet to them watching the broadcast. And it was they were the same time and long durations. For TFT, we get very long average watch times, close to, I think it's up to 69 minutes average watch time of people sitting and watching the broadcast. And then you have a similar duration of people using the WallStreet app, which has been really interesting. I think that's what we're really trying to dig into, is some of the case studies around how the community is interacting with the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I can guarantee you, if you see me on there, bet on 8th, because that's about as good as I ever do in TFT. One more thing I wanted to ask you about really quickly, speaking of taboo areas like betting, is in activations, we've been seeing a lot more activations by companies in the alcoholic beverage space. We've been seeing a lot more activations in fringe investment things like crypto and NFT, even though I don't really consider that fringe, but standard investors might. So talk about maybe real quickly about that, about what your experience has been with some of the brands that are just starting to get into activations in gaming.
Yeah, I think anybody who's been keeping an eye on esports or partnerships will have noticed this last year has just exploded with brands getting into the space. And interestingly, a lot of, non-endemic brands that you wouldn't expect to get into the space are coming in very interesting and creative ways. At least, the good partnerships is when they're creatively coming into the space. I think there's a huge opportunity with crypto. I think we're going to see more of it. Obviously, we've just seen the big, the FTX with TSM deal, with then Riot also partnering up with FTX. So I think we're going to see a lot more with crypto because there's the crossover of the demographics, right? The gamer demographic and crypto. I think we'll see a lot more of that. And then you're seeing game companies start to loosen up where they might have been more restrictive on sponsorships when it comes to beverage or betting. I know Activision had recently announced that they were opening up those categories, and I think it's only going to trend that way more. It's only a matter of time before those are essentially open categories. And I think every brand right now is looking at, there's huge FOMO going on, right? We're starting to see like huge luxury apparel brands get in. We're seeing brands with Gucci and Louis Vuitton and Ralph Lauren, like brands you would not expect to get into the space. But now I have no doubt that in the coming months, we're going to see more and more and more of that as brands are getting savvier to what's happening into this demographic that is hard to reach otherwise, right? They're the cord cutters, they're the ad blockers. They want people to be real. They want people to care about what they care about. And I think that's where we're seeing success in activations and in partnerships is when the brand understands who they are as a brand, and then understands how they can best talk to that audience and become a part of the community, right? It's not just slapping your logo on something, which is what used to be done in the past. It's really now about how can you, as a brand, become part of the conversation, become truly integrated in the activation with that community. And those are the brands that are succeeding in huge ways with the brand sentiment.
So, Nicole, I think your background makes you really uniquely positioned to weigh in on the co-streaming debate. So co-streaming with influencers as a way for tournament organizers to expand viewership. I think it's become somewhat of a hot button topic, and there's certainly been some discussion around whether it's helpful or it's harmful to the industry. So I'm curious what your perspective is on co-streaming and what you think the future of co-streaming is within the esports industry.
Yeah, co-stream that's a great question to ask, and a great thing to keep an eye on, and something. I know we were talking about TFT. It's something that we actually had to leverage with TFT based on to broadcast TFT because there's not an in-game observer. We have to pull the individual live streams from each competitor to produce the content. So we almost have to force co-streaming, which is very unusual, but has actually been incredibly successful in some ways if you're tracking the aggregate viewership for the broadcast, right? So because some influencers will pull 10,000 viewers, like an average CCV of 10K themselves, which can really boost the engagement for the game and for a brand who might be participating. Where it gets interesting is, so there's a couple of things. It's really valuable to leverage co-streamers and to leverage influencers because anytime a streamer or an influencer is not producing content on their challenge, that's a really big deal for them, right? That's where they make their bread and butter is on their channel and putting content there. So it's a sacrifice for them to not be streaming there. where it gets tricky is making sure if you have partnerships or brands who are sponsoring an event, if you can't activate on the influencer's co-stream, that's where it can feel bad because if that's a big part of the viewership that's being pulled in, that can hurt them. However, what we've done very well is being able to leverage activating the brand on the influencers' channels. So having their logo show up on the overlay, having the chat commands that can then drive click-throughs to, whatever the landing page is, whatever the call to action is, which is really powerful because then you're able to activate in all these different influencer channels without having to do separate influencer deals. But as them competing in that tournament, they are participating in, supporting that brand. That's kind of part of the contract that they have to sign. And so there is a really unique opportunity to leverage influencers and almost leverage influencer marketing like through co-streaming. It just comes down to that fine line of, you can't activate all of the partners on the influencers because you can't, that's not going to be realistic, right? So there's the partners that you could activate on the primary broadcast. I think we will see more of it. I think more like Twitch is doing it. Twitch Rivals does it all the time. Other events are, I think, kind of being forced into it because influencers want it. And I think where companies or brands or game publishers have to get creative is, okay, how do we still provide value for the brands activating or sponsoring this event with the influencers? And there's ways where you could work in other content that maybe the influencers are doing or separate activations where the influencers are supporting it. But there's a big opportunity to essentially hit a wider reach and then be even more effective because you're talking to that streamer's audience. They could convert better than maybe the main broadcast, depending. So we've seen a lot of success with it personally. It's something that we're keeping an eye on with where the industry will go with that. I think it's going to be around for a while, but it's something that I keep my eye on how do you still fulfill the partnerships and getting that essentially that advertising opportunity with the co-streamers challenge or the co-streamer channels. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so in that same vein, have you faced like specific legal challenges in the co-streaming space or broader than that, within esports activation, advertising issues?
I think occasionally it's come down to if there's a conflicting sponsor. So say a competitor on Cloud9, just hypothetical, a competitor on Cloud9 has a partnership with a brand that conflicts with the sponsor of the event. So that's where it can get a little tricky, where we'd have to ask the competitor to not have their overlay on, or that's where it gets into like we have to protect ourselves in the contract that the player is signing and kind of sometimes have individual conversations. It just gets down into like exclusivity or if there's conflicting partnerships. We haven't seen a whole ton of issues yet, but I keep in the back of my mind that we'll probably see more in the future on like inevitably, right, as this continues to grow. I'd actually be very curious to hear your all take either now or in the future on that too.
Yeah, and talk about the agreements. You're doing agreements with streamers. You're doing agreements with publishers. There's a lot of legal going on there, and you got to pay attention to what the terms of every one of those agreements say, and make sure that you're not, crossing over anything that could cause a problem, or have you in a situation where an advertiser is coming back to you and saying, "Well, why did you do this in the stream?"
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's where we try to get ahead of it as much as we can and just be very transparent, over communicate, just really try to keep an eye on any conflicts that might arise and then addressing it with, the publisher or the org or the player or whoever it is. And just essentially we try to see how we can make everyone happy. It doesn't always work. And sometimes we can't put a sponsor logo on a co-stream. That happens sometimes.
Right.
But, maybe there's other workarounds that we can figure out. But of course, they'd still get pulled onto the main broadcast. But it's definitely an area that is interesting to navigate. Contracts, agreements, making everyone happy, licenses, all of that jazz, which I know you guys are well aware of.
Yes,
all
indeed.
the fun stuff.
So, Nicole, the last thing I wanted to ask you about was in-game advertising. We saw Riot Games make a pretty big splash in April of May or last year by having in-game advertising in League of Legends, where you can see the banners inside of League of Legends have advertising on them, and you can see them when you're watching a competition on Twitch or elsewhere. But the players can't see them when they're in there. So it's kind of an interesting concept. What have you seen since they made that announcement in that in-game advertising space? And what do you expect for that for the next year?
I expect there's going to be a lot more when it comes to in-game advertising. I think that's starting to change, particularly for marquee events like some of the major tournaments, but also with what esports orgs and other value or other ways that competitive teams can leverage their sponsors potentially in major games and in major broadcasted events. I think it's only just begun. I think it will really, because that's the prime real estate, right? Whatever you can get in game, even if it's only in game on the main broadcast where you have hundreds of thousands of people viewing, that is really valuable and different from what's currently being done, whether it's a logo rotator or other branded content that's done. I think where things are getting really exciting, and there's some stuff I can't talk about yet, which I really wish I could, with advertising opportunities that then fans can play in the game beyond just what's in broadcast. So maybe we can do a follow-up call in the fall with when some things are live. All I'll say is that more is coming. And there's going to be, those are incredibly valuable to sponsors, right? Like placement in the game itself, whether it's on broadcast or whether fans can play with the skins or the maps or whatever it is that's branded. I think we will see a lot more of that in the coming years. And actually, I was just thinking, I was also trying to think, before this interview about, some of my favorite activations. That have happened in esports within the last couple years. And one of them that I think was really clever, that is also in game, was the Burger King FIFA activation, where they bought, and I don't know if either of you have heard about this one, but they bought, I think it was the lowest tier team, Stevenage, I think is what it was called. So they sponsored a real life soccer team or football team, and they did it with the idea to get into FIFA, because they could put Burger King on the logo of this team that was like a real soccer team competing in Europe. And then because of that, they were able to get into FIFA and have Burger King on the jerseys, because that was the jerseys that the professional team was wearing. And so they did this huge campaign online once they got onto FIFA, and having fans playing with that team in the game, and tons of social media success and earned impressions. And it was a really fascinating case study and very creative, right? It was the long-term strategy that Burger King was let's buy this team so that we can get in this esports game, get in the game. It was a total, you'd never think that that's how that would work. And then they really leveraged the social media campaign on top of that, and the streaming on top of that, and having people play with that team and then share their clips and share their photos, and have maybe Messi's in a Burger King jersey in this game. It was really cool, really well done. And actually, just on that note, so that's a really creative example of in-game advertising, but a very different approach.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that at all, and I'm surprised that more companies don't do it, especially in the sports space. I mean, there's a game that I play a lot, MLB The Show, a baseball game. You have in game, you have all the jerseys of all the minor league teams, right? Exactly. And those teams aren't expensive to buy. No. If I want to buy the Reading Phillies, maybe I do that just for the opportunity to put Comcast on their jersey,
right?
So yeah, it's a really interesting proposition, and it's something I think we might see more companies thinking about.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, with traditional sports, I I know there's going to be a lot more crossover there, and people looking at what traditional sports have done well when it comes to in-game. You could consider in-game advertising, right? Like if you think of the field, or if you think of like the hockey rink or the football field, there's logos placed right on the field. I don't think it's going to be long before we see that in games. I mean, in Rocket League, they already have like they put logos, or Verizon has activated in the game. On the stands and other ways kind of in the backdrop of the game that's happening. So I think we will absolutely see more of that. And I think there's going to be ways where the teams that are competing in the esports orgs will be able to get a piece of that too. So I'm excited. I think there's a lot more opportunity. It's only really the tip of the iceberg. But what's excited me most with esports activations is there's so much creativity happening, which, as a marketer, someone who comes from marketing and advertising, it's forced brands to do something different, to talk to this audience differently, to integrate really authentically and creatively. And, depending on if it's MasterCard, right? Who they know they're not cool. They're not a cool brand. So when they entered with the LEC, or, with Riot has done a lot of phenomenal partnerships, like League of Legends. They've done some really smart ones, and really ones you wouldn't expect, which I think is always interesting to look at. Like the ones that aren't endemic or seem like they're totally different fits from the gaming demographic, but are done well. Those are the ones that are just fascinating case studies to look at. So I don't know. I'm excited for what's to come in the future, because what we've seen this past year is honestly the tip of the iceberg. And I mean, almost every esports team has car sponsors. You're seeing luxury brands get into the space. You're seeing insurance. It's the biggest opportunity right now.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good note to end it on, Nicole. We really appreciate you coming on with us today. It's been a great discussion, and we hope maybe to catch up with you again in the fall when there's some more information to be revealed. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's just something that I'm passionate about. I'm excited about it. It's a great time to be in this industry. So
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. A big thank you to Nicole DuCane Spencer from Wisdom Gaming coming on and talking with us about tons of interesting topics in advertising and activations in video games. If you have any questions about any of the legal issues that we've raised on the broadcast today, drop them into the comments and we will do our best to answer them without providing any real legal advice, of course. Until the next time, I'm Darius, this is Leah, and we are Lawyers with Game. We'll see you next time.